It is so important to remember human authorities make mistakes, and we should never submit to or enable evil in any form. We should never commit wrong, even if asked to do so. Authorities make mistakes. So important for us, even when we're looking at our parents, to recognize we're going to stand before God someday for what we did or did not do. It's important that we know what we believe and follow it. You'll give an account to God for every action or inaction, for every compliance or non-compliance, or for confronting evil or condoning evil.
Hey everyone, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is June 13th, Tuesday. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I was spending some time yesterday. I did a video about Ben Seawald. You just saw some clips about David Waller, who is Josh Duggar's biggest cheerleader, and he spent last Wednesday talking all about authority and why it's so good to have authority and how you need to respect authority, because that's a response without being a response. Someone in my comments, I can't remember who, asked about are you sure that these guys will do these sermons? Are they really directing them, or are they responding to what is out there? And I will say yes. The reason why I know is because I work with multiple people that know the Duggars, and I will show them a sermon that is given by, say, David Waller or Ben Seawald, and I'll have them listen. And then they, because they grew up around the Duggars or they know Jim Bob specifically, can say yes or no. So I try not to read too much into things until I have it go by one of the sources. And so with the Ben stuff, really what the source said was that a lot of that was about virtue signaling for Jessa. So basically Jessa is the golden child, the one that's doing the right things. She's not complaining, and it's a way to save face with Jim Bob, and that Jim Bob will utilize, according to the source, multiple different facets of the system to spread a message to keep people in line. And the messages really are to keep people in line. Someone in my comments on Instagram had mentioned that John MacArthur and some of the followers of his will use the same sort of Philippians teachings when it comes to not complaining and not grumbling and gossiping and whatnot. And that he's also espousing aspects of MacArthur along with Jim Bob Duggar. And that's also true. You know, the complicated part about Ben Seawald is that he is so loyal to Jim Bob because Jim Bob provided him opportunities, paid for him to go to seminary school through providing him work opportunities and tutoring and income, provided him free housing. He has been bought and paid for a lot, like a lot of the groupies that are around the Duggars. And so even though Ben comes from a different theological perspective, and even though Ginger credits him for teaching her about a different theology, you didn't see or hear Ben ever publicly say a word about Ginger's book. You didn't hear Jessa publicly say a word about Ginger's book either. And you didn't see either one of them praising Ginger for praising them for helping her, because they're loyal to Jim Bob. So when I watch stuff like David Waller praising authority, they're really looking at their image and how people are viewing them, and they're paying attention to the fact that people are going to be watching them. They know that the media has an interest in them, and so this is now their opportunity to double down and reinforce their beliefs and not bend to what they perceive to be the public and this world that they don't like.
Tarrant County Jail Ministry, we had the privilege of going out and handing out Bibles with the Gideons yesterday and had a wonderful time. There were a lot of Bibles handed out. We had the opportunity to bring in 2 cases of 100 Bibles into the 2 dorms that I went into. And what was really neat is how hungry they were for the Word of God.
So yesterday I brought out my Bible, my beautiful pink Bible. And, I was thinking about how there was parts of Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Secrets, that we didn't talk about. And one part was specifically in the 4th episode. Now, when you've on this channel, been on my channel, you know for sure that we talked about this. We talked about how Jim Bob Duggar lied on the witness stand and said that he could not remember specific details about what happened to his daughters back years and years ago. And it was this testimony that was deemed basically not credible because he had a bad memory. Now, the judge Jim Bob was very combative in his testimony, and he was very angry, and he was like argumentative. And we learned through the docuseries that Jill Duggar was willing to testify against Josh, okay? So Jill Duggar was on the witness list, and if you recall, she was never called. And we weren't sure why, right? Well, Bobby Holt gave the testimony. Bobby Holt didn't necessarily have to give the testimony, but I think what the prosecutors were trying to do was to minimize the damage and the hurt and harm to someone like Jill to have to become a vocal part of Josh's case. And so they were trying to find some other source that would be able to speak for them, basically, and that had the details. But it was Jim Bob's specific background that really, it was his testimony that caused a lot of questions. And it actually got people like the Holts, who, by the way, I'm not a fan of, Amy Duggar and her husband basically saying that they could not believe that they were that he couldn't remember things. And even, Jill saying that the hardest part of this whole thing was the stuff getting brought up about the past and that never should have been public to begin with. And I can understand where Jill is coming from, but unfortunately, anyone that goes through something like she did, in so many ways, what happens to the victims unfortunately becomes part of the case. And I can understand her pain and her hurt, but in the legal system, we can't really prevent. I mean, most of the time victims are protected and you don't know who they are, but a lot of times we know who they are. And so unfortunately, I think Jill is still dealing with a lot of the shame that comes with this culture of that you've caused something to cause what happened to you. And I think once someone can kind of get over the fact that, like, yes, you've been victimized by someone, but it's nothing that you did or nothing that caused you for that to happen to you, you can find some ways to get through the shame. I know myself, being a survivor of that one of the biggest ways for me to heal was to recognize that I had nothing to be ashamed of, and that even if it became public, even if anyone, and it did become public for me, even if people questioned me, I knew the truth and I knew what I had gone through. Jill is still in a recovery mode of having to come through all of those horrible IBLP teachings. But Jim Bob's lack an ability to actually tell the truth on the witness stand was a part of this, where Amy Duggar said it made her sick. Jill said that it was really upsetting that this stuff had to be dealt with still, but she would have testified anyway. But Jim Bob, his behavior, his lies. Derick Dillard pointed out that he lied to the public, that he knew the day that Jim Bob put the statement out about how it was not true that HSI had basically raided one of their houses or had been at one of their businesses, that he said it wasn't true, and he said that nobody was under investigation. And Derick Dillard in the series said that he knew that very day that Josh was under investigation and that it was related to Josh. And so Derick called him out for you quashed the problems for a minute, but eventually it was going to come out that Josh was under investigation. So he was pointing out how much Jim Bob was lying and lying for Josh throughout this. And his testimony at trial, one question was, do you remember what Josh Duggar told you in 2003 that made you have him leave your home? Jim Bob says, no, I don't know what Josh said word for word. I mean, there was some inappropriate touching that happened, and we tried to handle things in-house. So a lot of his answers were I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. He could remember specific details about Jim Holt. He could remember specific details about their church, but he couldn't remember about Josh, and he kept saying that it was 19 years ago. Something else he did was argued with the prosecutors about the In Touch police report being used by the prosecutors to refresh his memory. So because Jim Bob was being literally so combative and playing dumb, basically, the prosecutor, Carly Marshall, had to hand him what was in the police report and say, do you remember telling police this? Because the police report was very specific about what Josh had done, and Jim was very specific about what Josh had done to his daughters. And Jim was like, wouldn't even entertain it because it was from a tabloid, and you're going to allow this tabloid to be in here? This was a juvenile sealed record. And sadly, the girls have been brainwashed by their dad about how there was this big conspiracy with the police to release these records and that they had this agenda, which wasn't true. And Jill in the series was even talking about how she wished that none of this had ever been public. And yet for years, she was part of a very public lawsuit against the city and the state and the county for the release of these records. And in those documents in court, they admitted to what Josh had done. So there was a lot of evidence, whether it was from this police report or from the lawsuit. This had been in the public domain for a very long time. And yet Jim Bob's making the girls feel ashamed that this even was public still permeates them to this day. And that is the most heartbreaking part of this to me. It was good to hear Jim Bob be called out for the lies and for lying about what happened to Josh. It was good to hear Derick Dillard call him out about the lies, about what they went through, and how Jim Bob was protecting Josh. And so when you see these responses, like David Waller, he spends an hour of his pastor Wednesday evening telling everyone about how, they're in the prison systems and they're handing out their Gideon Bibles, proving, Bill Gothard Sr., William Gothard Sr. was the executive director of Gideon Bibles for years, and Bill Gothard's father. And he's like, I was with Gideon Bibles and we were handing out this. Like, he is still loyal to Bill Gothard. And at one point, David, is even like, we don't stand by authority. If they try to get us to do illegal things, or if they make mistakes and if they're abusing people, they're still people. That's the excuse all of these people always will say, is that, we can still believe in the teachings, but we can't. It's the fallen man. They used Bill to bring these teachings, but this is still the gospel. And it's not the gospel. To further drive home this point, someone that's actually friends with the Duggars, actually, in fact, their in-law, Rob Spivey, who was a member of the IBLP, still is a member of the IBLP, is a member of David Waller's church. He is Justin's father-in-law. He was one of Josh's mentors when he was going through his training years ago in Little Rock. Rob Spivey shared or liked a tweet that said, the last few days I've been watching Shiny Happy People on Amazon. This entire documentary is using the sin of Josh Duggar to attack the gospel. The entire thing is awful. It's just heartbreaking. Rob Spivey said that the one sin of Josh is being used to attack the gospel. The gospel was never attacked in that series, by the way. They never went into the book of Matthew and said the book of Matthew was the problem. No, they were talking about Bill Gothard using the gospel and using the teachings of God and twisting it into a system that was authoritarian and controlling. No one was attacking the gospel. No one was attacking homeschooling. They were attacking the homeschooling of Bill Gothard. They were attacking the homeschooling that was inept and inadequate about what Bill Gothard was teaching the kids. They were attacking Bill Gothard's teachings. They were pointing out the flaws of his teachings. They were not attacking the Bible. They were not attacking Christianity, even though Christians believed they were. They weren't. And they also were not attacking the gospel. But the problem with the IBLP believers and the staunchest believers is they believe that Bill Gothard is God. He is like the prophet that speaks for God, and he is the gospel. So if you attack God, you attack Gothard. Now put this in line with how the families rule things, and if you attack Jim Bob, you attacked God, because the dad is the authority and the supreme. So you have all these people that are defending Josh. You have all these people that Jim Bob is lining up to have them put out content and to stand with Josh and to stand with him and to prove that they're good people. But the truth is all of that is noise, and it's trying to distract people and his fans and his followers away from the truth of this system and of this series and of the truth of the matter. And I'm so glad to see people in my comments for the first time literally understand what I have been saying for years when I talk about how their kids that are under Jim Bob's control are just spewing what he tells them to spew, and people finally recognize that that's the case, and they understand that, oh, these are just his talking points. We probably should like just take it with a grain of salt and not, support this, because people are finally seeing how Jim Bob utilizes his own children as weapons against one another. In any family, it's difficult to speak out, but those that are speaking out against this are being villainized, which is wrong. So Jim Bob is getting called out all over the place. He's getting called out in articles. He's getting called out by, other people in Christianity. He's getting called out by survivors that are calling for better systems and better regulations for homeschooling in the state of Arkansas. Arkansas has like the loosest laws when it comes to homeschooling, and part of that is because of the Duggars' influence and the IBLP's influence. They don't even really have to do testing anymore in the state of Arkansas. And the problem with people like Jim Bob is not all homeschoolers are wrong, not all people that homeschool are wrong, but the problem is that with abusive parents like the Duggars, it takes the kids out of a system where mandated reporters will know what happened to them. And so the girls who were being abused by Josh might have actually been able to get help earlier had they been in a public school. But when they're not going to the doctor and they're not going to public schools, no one knows the wiser. And if they're handling everything in-house at church, where they have these Matthew rules about you can't gossip and you can't sue your family members and you can't use the police, you have to handle things in church, you're allowing and fostering a community that's completely anti-biblical, by the way, and also completely protecting abusers. So as you're seeing all of these people slam Jill and all of this criticism, just remember this: all of it is noise from the truth of who the true monsters are, and that is that Jim Bob is a liar. Jim Bob lied on the witness stand. Jim Bob bared false witness. So if you go into the Bible in the Old Testament, they always talk about not bearing false witness against your neighbor, not lying, being honest. And the absolute opposite of what Jim Bob did was being honest. And he did bear false witness, and he did lie on the witness stand, and he did protect someone that he shouldn't have protected. And he did it exact opposite of what they taught in the Bible. So in the book of Matthew, it says, I tell you the truth, unless you turn from your sins and become like little children, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven. So anyone becomes as humble as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And anyone who welcomes a little child like this on my behalf is welcoming me. But if you cause one of these little ones who trust in me to fall into sin, it would be better for you to have a large millstone tied around your neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. If you harm a child, if you tempt them with sin, if you do something that's sinful against a child, it's better for you to be thrown by a millstone into the sea. But they never talk about that. It's always like, don't gossip, don't do this, don't do that. So yes, Jim Bob is trying to use people to deflect, but the fact of the matter is he got slammed for lying. He got slammed for lying on the witness stand. He got slammed for using corporal punishment in his home. He got slammed for lying to the public. He got slammed for covering up the allegations about Josh. He got slammed all the way around. And Jim Bob and his friends should be stopped. They need to be stopped, frankly, or else this is going to continue. And there's lots of action that people can take. There's working with your lawmakers to get better regulations for homeschooling. But really, there needs to be protection for children. And in Arkansas, frankly, right now, kids are the last thing that they seem to care about. And it's sad. And it's because cults like the IBLP have infiltrated the government. It's because these extremists have created laws that protect abusers. And that's how you end up getting people like Jim Bob Duggar, end up getting people like Josh Duggar, and how you end up getting people like David Waller defending Josh. So tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.